Tucker Carlson gets the axe first, and then we're like, oh my God. Then CNN axes Don Lemon. And then Don Lemon, as you said, takes to Twitter and says, I don't agree with the CNN statement. No one informed me. And then CNN quickly does a fact check. Fact checks Don quicker than it fact checks the right-wing nuts that they bring on nowadays. And what I think was really interesting is if you look at the CNN statement, corporate talk is so funny to me. They're like, yeah, we just let Don go. And according to Don, like, he had no idea, just like Tucker. He was like preparing to like the host the show. He's like, he will forever be part of our family. And then I was just so curious. I'm like, what type of family he like cuts you from the family and says, by the way, never come to the barbecue?
Succession.
I just love what I said, but he'll forever be part of the CNN family. I'm like, eh. So Don goes, Tucker goes. Apparently, Daniel, from what we know, both of them were just completely blindsided by it. Tucker was preparing for a show. Tucker signed off on Friday saying, see you on Monday. Don was like, hosting the morning show. My take on it is this. CNN has always tried to straddle the line of being, quote unquote, both sides. And I saw this when I was at CNN, right? In the like, literally, it hugs power too closely. So I was in the green room and I saw some of the folks who I was supposed to debate. All the right-wingers that were pro-Trump, except two of them, told me in the green room, Danielle, that he was a fraud. And yet they went on TV and we did this both sides analysis and they completely derailed the conversation. And Zucker, who used to be the head of CNN, allowed it because it was good ratings. It was good theater, even though it hurt the truth. Don kind of elevated himself in the past couple of years because he was one of the few people, and one of the only few people of color. Let's not forget, folks, that before Joy Reid, Don Lemon was the only anchor of color from 6 p.m. to midnight across the three networks, Fox, MSNBC, and CNN. So that means across 18 hours of primetime television on cable news, there was only Don. So Don then, who had this history, let's be honest, of saying dumb things, got elevated in the past few years because he was one of the few people who stood up to Trump, became good theater. Personally, I will say that Don was always good to me in that he allowed me space to take on Trump and call it out. And on the DL, he appreciated me for doing it. He said, you're like a voice in our network who actually takes this person on. And I will say this, is that Don reached out to me to come onto his show when there was this, remember that guy, Jeffrey Lord, who was one of the early adopters of Trump, and he got fired because he said Hail Hitler on Twitter. He was that like old white guy who smiled and defended Trump before everyone else. I took him on and I destroyed him. And Don then found my text number from someone and texted me. Said, I was just watching you on TV right now. No one else has taken this guy on like you before. Come on my show. So I just want to be very transparent that my relationship, if that is with Don from a professional level, was he always championed me because I took on Trump and called out fascism. Now, the history of Don is
very different.
Is very different in that he has a history of misogyny and making misogynistic comments. And recently, he said that Nikki Haley was over the hill, and his two colleagues.
It wasn't even just like it was couched in the context of talking about Nikki Haley's presidential announcement. But he basically said that all women.
There you go.
All women.
There you go.
After the age, after
52
30
or 55 or what?
No, it was just like after you get out of your 30s. You're out of your prime.
Sorry, Danielle, you're done.
And then he said, but then it was wild because he has his two women co-hosts.
That's right. Caitlin and Poppy,
who are like trying to pull him back.
Failing.
Say like, yeah, I don't think you mean that, blah, blah. And he's like, no, Google it.
10 toes down. And then a report came out recently, and this is where I told my friends when that expose came out about 2 weeks ago that a history of making these comments, a history of kind of diva-like behavior, a history of women, his colleagues and superiors, complaining about his behavior. Soledad O'Brien, a former guest, echoed it. And I told my friends, he's out. Like, once this comes out, it will give CNN pretext to get rid of him. And they're like, no, they won't get rid of Don. He's one of the few people of color. He's a holdover from that. And I'm like, he is out. I've been in this game a long time. And this new network, and before we pivot to Fox, and I want your thoughts on this also, is CNN, folks, and this is important. According to the New York Times, it wasn't due to his misogyny and his history of making his colleagues uncomfortable. That's not the reason why he got kicked out, folks. The reason, according to the New York Times, I kicked out was due to a very good interview he actually did recently.
I know. And I'm like, this is the reason?
Where, again, with Poppy by his side, he went in and called out this guy, Vivek Ramaswamy, who is literally the anti-woke CEO, a son of Indian immigrants, who's trying to be the presidential candidate for 2024, said a whole bunch of rancid racist bullshit, and Don called him out. The NRA helped black people. He goes, whoa, whoa, whoa. And you could tell that his producers were in his ear, because in the clip, he goes, stop talking to me. And he goes all in, and Poppy doesn't say a word. So the New York Times said the fact that he doubled down and apparently went against his producer's wishes and took him out, which good for Don, that's why they got rid of him, which shows you the direction of CNN.
Right. And so, because I watched that interview, because now that interview started to go around right after the firing, because when he was benched after the misogyny comment, I was like, oh, this isn't just about this one comment. It is about your history of misogyny, right? Your history of just purposefully putting your foot in your mouth. But much in the same way, and we'll talk about Tucker in a minute, this is about the ego of men in media.
That's right.
Right? So whether or not you are a black gay man or you are a white supremacist fascist, like there is something about the camera and men and believing that their brand, their personal brand, supersedes that of the network that they're on. Right. And so when I watched the interview with Vivek, who, by the way, I had seen interviews with this guy before, and I'm like, you are brown skin Hitler. Like, I don't know how you come out and talk about your ethnic, like talk about your cultural and your ethnic background in the same way Nikki Haley does, and then want to double down on racism and white supremacy. And I'm like, your fucking family wouldn't have made it here if not for the civil rights movement. So you may want to shut the fuck up. And so I appreciated Don in that interview, because I was just like, he's like, you don't know what you're talking about as it pertains to black people. Like, you have no idea what you're talking about. And Vivek is like, you can research it. And I'm just like, so you see Poppy watching these two guys have like a friggin', throwdown, and she's sitting there rolling her eyes because
she's like,
it's
I
just
ain't getting
like,
into this.
I'm not getting in this. And you see her like on her phone, probably being like, checking her face. But the whole scene, right, I thought was one, like, Don was good in that moment, but it was also very disrespectful to his co-host. It was also like, again, like, it's the men that are going to have this talk, right? And like, and her to the sidelines. But look, I have never, like I said, I've never gone on CNN. I have never been a fan of Don Lemon. I don't think that I like really smart, aggressive, thoughtful people, not just folks that read the headlines and a teleprompter. And that is how I had always found Don Lemon. I appreciate the fact that he would give a wider berth to his smart guests when he had them, because he didn't have the depth, or as the kids say, did not have the range to be able to go in on certain topics. So if it's the Vivek reason that he was fired, shame on CNN. If it's the misogyny, then yeah, I get it.
Yeah, but also if it is the misogyny, then it goes back to the initial point you said about these men whose ego and tantrums are tolerated, right? Like, this is nothing new, because if you read that article, there is a history of it. And the reason why it's tolerated, and the reason why Bill O'Reilly was tolerated for sexually harassing women and literally like paying them millions of dollars to shut up and stay silent, is because it's good ratings. At the end of the day, what folks have to realize about news is that it's corporate news, right? Fox is a business. CNN is a business, right? And at the end of the day, if you are worth it, they will tolerate it. If you are worth
Matt Lauer.
Yeah, they will tolerate it. And as long as you ain't worth it, folks, in the age of capitalism where money is God, you will be replaced, but money will never be replaced. In God we trust, and that color is green. And going back to your point, Danielle, these men and women, oftentimes it's men, overwhelmingly it's men, forget that there are pawns in the machine. They think they become irreplaceable. I am this network. You'll never replace me. And Matt Lauer, peace out. Bill O'Reilly, peace out. Don Lemon, peace out. Now,
Charlie Rose, peace out. Like, I mean, the list goes on and on and on.
Charlie Rose, peace out.
Peace out.
Harvey Weinstein. But if we switch over to Fox, and I gave this analogy yesterday, I just wrote about it today. You know, people are celebrating, and we should celebrate. This is a good moment that every time a white supremacist loses his hood, an angel gains its wings, right? I just came up with that, by the way. He inspired me. But we should applaud that he's gone. But the way the system works, folks, is that it's like Hydra. You cut off one head, two heads grow in its place. And we're the old heads, if we are, Daniel. We've seen things. And I want to warn people about this. When Bill O'Reilly got canned for toxic behavior, everyone was celebrating. I said, who's the next guy is going to be Tucker. And Tucker came in and took Bill O'Reilly's chauvinism and demagoguery and put it on steroids, Danielle. So the question I have for you is, Tucker's gone. What's coming in his place?
Something worse.